Welcome to the Convocation Unscripted, a podcast at the intersection of religion, culture, and politics. I'm your host for this episode, Jemar Tisby, and I am joined by Diana Butler Bass,
Hey, happy December, everybody.
Kristin Du Mez,
Hey, Jamar, good to be here.
and Robbie Jones.
Hey everybody, glad to be back.
If you're new here, we're each scholars, three historians, and one sociologist who write about religion and its intersection with culture, history, and politics in America. And the way it works is somebody introduces a topic, no one else knows quite what it's going to be, and we give you our authentic, honest responses in the moment. That's why it's called the Convocation Unscripted. And this episode of the Convocation of Unscripted is now in session. Well, folks, we are in December, but also we just got back from our Thanksgiving breaks. And so I am curious about what everyone did. Robbie, let's start with you. How was your Thanksgiving?
Sure. Well, it was low key, I'm happy to say. And I do just want to say, we're back in our boxes here on Zoom. We actually got to spend some time together.
I missed you guys.
I know. In October
Yeah.
and in November, we got to hang out in Arizona and North Carolina and Georgia. So anyway, it's a little sad to be kind of back in our boxes here, but Thanksgiving was great. Have been on the road as all of us have been, last fall. So we intentionally planned to just kick it at home. So it was us and one family who was also not, out on the road visiting relatives. And we just hung out. We cooked. I cooked a legless turkey, which I had not done before. I didn't know they came that way, but it came without legs. It was the most bizarre thing ever. And it turns out without legs, it won't stand up in the pan. So I had to kind of prop it up with onions on the side to kind of get it to stand up in the pan. So it was a little bit of a comedy there, but we had kind of, our traditional from Mississippi sweet potato casserole, which sounds like a vegetable, but is definitely not, mostly brown sugar and butter. But it was good and just kind of hung out at home, did not go anywhere.
That sounds ideal in a lot of ways. Kristin, how about you?
Yeah, we had a similar Thanksgiving. We just had one friend over, and my stipulation there was that, absolutely come over, prepare to just relax. And I don't set a time for the big dinner so that I don't feel pressured to get everything done on time so it worked out beautifully, especially because my kids are getting a little bit older. And so my kids really pitched in, and usually the morning is like scrambling to get all the different dishes ready because I still like the whole spread just for myself. And so I got out the recipe box with my grandma's cranberry salad recipe, which is a multi-step thing and a multi-ingredient, including Cool Whip, just so you can kind of picture this. And I decided to hand the recipe card to my daughter, and she said, "Yeah, I got this." And she made that and flipped it over and found another of Grandma's classic 50s salad recipes, rich salad, secret ingredient, sweetened condensed milk for that one. And I
Sounds
went off
very
to the
Midwestern.
gym, came back, and like half the meal was prepped already. And so it was a very fun time. We meant to go see Wicked, but honestly, we were just having such a nice time doing puzzles and playing chess. We didn't really leave the house. So that still is on our to-do list. So it was a much needed kind of staycation after being on the road for so much.
Train a child up in the way they should go, and they will cook Thanksgiving dinner for
Man,
you.
we have waited a long 15 years for this. So I'm happy to say it seems to finally be paying off.
And use lots of Cool Whip.
Cool Whip.
Diana, how'd you spend your Thanksgiving?
I was thinking Kristen needs to enjoy that while she has it, because we had at our house our first truly ever empty nester Thanksgiving. Um, as you all know, but not the people who listen to us, my daughter got engaged this month. And as it happened, she had already, with her future in-laws, planned a trip. And so her fiance's family all went to Puerto Rico for Thanksgiving, which was really nice. And we weren't there. We were at home, just me and my husband. And we made a small meal and had a very quiet day, and it was actually pretty nice. There was no real big stress. I've been kind of having some trouble with my stomach, so that was good too, that I didn't have to deal with a lot of food that I wasn't used to eating. And just I think the best part was sitting at the Thanksgiving table with this very simple turkey meal in front of us and looking at each other and saying, I'm grateful for you.
Hmm.
And that's after 28 years of marriage, to be with the person, that you chose each other so long ago. And yeah, it's been a good ride. And so we really had a chance to just appreciate that in this quiet, interesting Thanksgiving moment.
That is lovely. That is lovely. Glad you had that experience. Y'all could sit across the table and still be thankful for one another and the food. Um, I think mine is similar to y'all's. I mean, very low key. I did go up and visit my relatives in the Chicago area. The dinner was extremely chill. Nobody stressed about anything and pleasant. But the best part was the next day. Like you, Kristen, we had planned to go to try to see Wicked or something in the theater, but everything was packed, of course, that weekend. So we just decided to stay in and we watched a Modern Family marathon exclusively of their Thanksgiving and Christmas episodes, but over 11 seasons, that's a good number of episodes. And for me, the coolest part was the food. I had known for a while that you could actually order movie theater popcorn from the theater and get it delivered from DoorDash, but I hadn't tried it yet. So we did it this time. The best part, it came with butter that you could pour on. And then we had cotton candy and hot dogs and ices. And we just vegged out on the couch for like 3 hours, laughing ourselves silly and eating way too much sugar. But it was an absolute core memory formed. So very thankful for this Thanksgiving. And like Robbie said, we're all back here in our boxes. I missed y'all. It's good to see you again. Um, and I don't know about y'all. It's been a little bit hard for me to keep up with the news, partly because I haven't wanted to.
Yes.
I don't want to know
Yeah.
everything that's going on. But there has been a lot going on even before Trump is in office. He's making announcements and making moves. And this week, we're going to lead off our topic of discussion with Diana. So, to the extent that you even tuned in the past week or so, what's on your mind?
Well, the main thing is that you can't avoid, and I have been trying to avoid the news as well, but you can avoid hearing about these cabinet picks. Um, and yeah, it's one of those things where I've mostly been reading about them, occasionally watching very small bits of the news, and it's striking how many of these people are people who are associated with Project 2025 and are in the circles of Christian Reconstruction and Christian nationalism more generally. This is not a real star-studded show of Pentecostal types from Christian nationalism as the first Trump administration was. This is really the hardcore neo-reformed guys that Trump seems to be gathering close to him religiously, and it's not just as religious advisors, it's as Office of Management and Budget, it's as the Defense Secretary. It's I don't there's just like, well, Matt Gates, he is always kind of influenced by those circles, although they didn't particularly run in them, and he's out. Um, but you just kind of look at them. I think at last count, 6 different cabinet members were people who also authored chapters in Project 2025. So that's what I want to talk about. I want to talk about some of these other people that might not be getting quite as much media attention, find out what you all know about their records. I've been looking into Pete Hegseth. I know that Kristen has been too. So I just want to open it up to that, talking about Trump's cabinet and its connections to theology, Christian nationalism, Christian Reconstruction, Project 2025.
Yeah, Yeah, well, first let's just say like how shocked we all are because Trump gave us his word that he had nothing to do with Project 2025. He hadn't even read it, like so we're all still just reeling with shock
Can't
that in
believe it.
fact sorry, I can't even keep a straight face anymore. Uh, right, so and this is just points to one of the real challenges of this era, and not just post election, but in the lead up to the election, just the blatant and pervasive dishonesty. And so, as we're trying to respond and we're trying to comment, and, we're still following a certain kind of rule book and trying to keep to norms and tell the truth. It feels very one-sided here. And so, yes, here we are. This is what we've been talking about for the last several months. I know I wrote my first piece on Project 2025 I think back last February, March. We've been tracking this all, giving interviews and always having to qualify. Well, Trump says he's not doing this, but here's all the evidence that suggests otherwise. And, I saw with glee in the days after the election, a lot of people on the inside just absolutely like, oh, I guess we can talk about it now, masks off kind of thing. And so we all knew it, but it still is frustrating that we have to kind of still play by a certain set of rules when the other side is completely and utterly abandoned the rule book.
Yeah, that is really frustrating to me too. So uh, you guys, what have you noticed? Robbie, Jemar?
Yeah, I mean, I think we all wrote something on 2025, right? Because I think as soon as you, and I will say that I waded through all 900 and some odd pages of that thing to make sure that, like, I really understood what it was. I don't think I read every word, but I did sort of make my way through the whole thing and did some searches, online to kind of see what things popped up. But I mean, realizing that, I mean, it's a Christian nationalist document. I mean, there's got to be very clear about this. It doesn't always it got reported as an authoritarian document or a document that's about purging the bureaucracy or like those, but it's a Christian nationalist document. Like, it calls for a national day of the Sabbath, for example, right? The Christian Sabbath, by the way, not the Jewish one. To be clear about that, it calls for the Department of Human Services to get turned into the Department of Life, right? As in the kind of pro-life movement, and like those kinds of things, in addition to all the authoritarian and purging of kind of democratic, kind of structures as well. And so, that I think is striking. And just to connect one more dot here, that I mean, there was some reporting on this, but just to make it absolutely clear that Hegseth, right, on his bicep has this motto tattooed on there that is Deus Vult, right? It is God wills it. Now, for all of you who may have, zoned out during your high school medieval history
Who would ever
lessons,
do that?
right?
Come on.
This is the kind of thing that was shouted by the first Crusaders, right? The kind of conquest against Muslims, right? And he himself has been kind of witnesses say he was like shouting at a bar, right? Kill all the Muslims. And he's been known to saying all kinds of Islamophobic statements, but that statement has today been known to be among the far Christian right, who are really for a Christian state, right? And again, this is a very top law enforcement officer we're talking about, like getting installed by the Trump administration with that, like, believes it so much it's like tattooed on his body, right? And on a bicep, which is the kind of power move, right? That's right.
I
Yeah, that
heard
was actually supposedly there's reports in scattered historical documents of the Crusaders actually yelling that as they went into Jerusalem and started just slaughtering people. And then those same accounts later on, it talks about how the blood of the infidels was up to their ankles as they waded to the temple to celebrate the holy mass of Jesus. And it was like, oh, that stuff was brutal to read when training in our training as a church historian. You'd read that, and I'd have students read that sometimes, and they were utterly shocked. But that was the cry as they started hacking their enemies to death.
The hair pulling, one of the hair pulling aspects of all of this is people don't realize the depth of ideology that tattoo represents. I heard some very prominent political podcasters who aren't particularly religious say, don't focus on the tattoo, that's a distraction. People will look at that and say how silly the left is being. No, what we're doing is we're looking at the signs and symbols and the breadcrumbs that they put out there, and we're understanding the import and the implication of it. Pete Hegseth is coming from this neo-reformed, far right. I ran into these dudes back in years ago, more than a decade ago, when I was in a conservative Presbyterian denomination that was reformed, and I didn't know folks like this existed. Neo-Confederates, kinists, people with the most vile racial beliefs, but also gender beliefs, political beliefs. And now Hegseth is deep into that stuff. I mean, he's not tangential to these circles. And it is extremely hard edge, violent, machismo, patriarchal stuff. And it is still so hard to get the general population, to pay attention at all. The role ignorance played in the 2024 presidential election is not to be overstated. And then two, to understand the religious dimensions of it, which it's still infuriating that we don't have, and I'm not bashing journalists at all. They're going to be an incredibly important, they're going to have an incredibly important role going into this next administration. But y'all, please, like, we've got to understand the Christian nationalism here, the white Christian nationalism here, the import. And I got more to say on these darn cabinet picks. So Pete Hegseth, I think, is the most egregious, maybe not, I don't know, it's hard to say. Here's the latest that came out. A whistleblower report obtained by the New Yorker alleged that during his time leading a nonprofit advocacy group, Hegseth was repeatedly intoxicated at work events and gatherings with staff. It also alleges that he sexually pursued female staffers and that the organization ignored another staffer's alleged sexual misconduct. So he got booted. Hegseth got booted from not one, but two different veterans advocacy organizations amid these allegations of mismanagement and personal misconduct. Now, we want to approve this guy to be in charge of all of the military in the world's most powerful military. And the biggest critique folks have leveled against him is he's got no experience running a large organization at all. And the experience he does have with any organizations, he was booted out. So what are we doing here? He's not even the only one. Trump just talked about Kash Patel, wanting him in charge of the FBI, which, by the way, would necessitate the firing of Chris Wray, who he appointed in 2017 for a 10-year term. So 3 years before that term ends, he would have to fire him, put in this guy, Kash Patel, who went on a podcast and said this outlandish thing. He said on day one, he would kick out all the staff in the FBI headquarters, make FBI headquarters building a museum to the deep state, whatever that means, and then send out all the 7,000 employees to go catch criminals. That's his big plan. And we can talk even more. His pick for the Federal Communications Commission. This is flying under the radar to a dangerous extent. This guy's as far right as you get to be in charge of the FCC. He voted against net neutrality. He sent out a memo to the heads of Meta, Google, you name it, all these tech communications companies, and said, it's about to change. And you are not going to be able to, what did he call them? The censorship cartel. By censorship, he's probably referring to the fact that these organizations, particularly in 2020, were trying to throttle the misinformation machine. And so they were flagging certain posts as untrue or dubious, or they were suppressing hate speech, like literal racist, sexist hate speech, and that's what he wants to dismantle. So, folks, what are we doing here? And the only fire break that we have is the Senate approval process, which by no means guarantees that these folks won't go through. So I'm very, very, very concerned.
I just want to be jump in on this too, and what the point that you brought up. I think all of you in different ways. That this what we're looking at here is Christian nationalists being placed in several key positions, and like Jemar said, we know these guys. We've been tracking these guys for a very long time, and it's worth noting that what we know about Hegseth, his white nationalist tattoos, his there's several allegations of sexual assault, sexual misconduct. There's all sorts of things that we have on him. And he is reportedly a member of a CREC church. So this is the Doug Wilson branch. And, Doug Wilson has kind of set himself up as, or I think it was Tucker Carlson's words, the kind of leading example of Christian nationalism. This is who we're talking about, right? This is, and I mean, I could not pick a better poster boy for the kind of Jesus and John Wayne masculinity gone bad than Pete Hegseth, right? He covers it all, checks all the boxes. The anti-Islam, this pro-military, like deeply patriarchal, misogynistic, and abusive towards women, like the entire package. Like he just embodies it all. And we've placed him, well, we'll wait and see, pending Senate approval, right, in charge of the nation's military. It's absolutely stunning. And we could also talk, I think somebody mentioned in passing the Office of Management and Budget, right? We're
That's
talking
who I
Russ
really
Vought
want to
here.
talk about, Kevin Roberts. Right.
Yeah, Kevin Roberts, and then Russ Vought. And Russ Vought is now, as expected, appointed to be back in that position. Russ Vought, a self-identified Christian nationalist who wrote the chapter in Project 2025 on executive power. The whole thing about purging the government, installing loyalists, and concentrating power in the executive. And by executive, they mean particularly in one person, Donald Trump, to carry out this Christian nationalist agenda, right? So this is who we're talking about here. And this is exactly what we were talking about and why we were on the road for months ahead of the election to try to inform people, this is the choice that you are making. And then you add Kash Patel and and all of the language of retribution here. All the language of this isn't just to drain the swamp. This is also seek retaliation against anybody who is doing what? Illegal things? No, they weren't illegal. They were things that undermined the radicalism of Trump and his MAGA agenda. That's all it was, enforcing those norms and enforcing existing laws, right? That's what we're talking about, and they want to go after those people. And so it's a perilous moment, and we're all kind of waiting to see, what's saber rattling here and what's actually going to be playing out. But thus far, I have seen only signs of concern and nothing to alleviate that concern in any respect.
Can I just like one backtrack on Hegseth before we lose that thread?
Yeah.
Yeah, I have a question too.
Just one quick. It's notable too that so he is pro-military, but he's not pro-military honor.
No.
Right? He's defended war criminals,
Yes.
right? And even by the values of the military, right? He falls like far short of upholding like things like, there are codes of honor, right? That you're expected to follow in the military that he himself has like been part of undermining. So, I mean, even there, it's really scary. I think that, you'd be all for like, just turning loose, right? The military to commit all kinds of horrific things without any accountability at all.
Oh man, every time you say something, I feel like there's another bunny trail that we could go down. That I was thinking about the honor thing earlier because one of the most important codes in the military is you can't commit adultery because it shows a failure of moral character and failure to be able to keep your vows and make commitments. And so if you do, and you're an officer, you're going to be brought up and disciplined or and questioned by other officers about that. And so the idea of Hegseth, who just like is a rampant serial adulterer, and from everything that has been reported, being in charge of the military, what that does is it does exactly what Robbie you said, is unleashes the rest of everybody like, oh, I can do whatever I want. And what that does in terms of the use of sexual violence as a weapon of warfare, which is something that civilized countries resist. I'm not saying we always succeed at it, but we resist it. Is that's just gone then. That moral prohibition, that character prohibition, um, is that is really important to how warfare itself is conducted with the standards that we've held ourselves to for many years, and that is at least coming close to something like a just war. That's the public ethical standard for war. Like I said, we don't always go there, but it is at least the ideal. But I do want to bring up just two questions. One, does anybody know what's Kash Patel's religious background?
I don't
Okay,
think I know. Yeah.
that's one to find out. I'm interested in that. But then the second thing is that Russ Vought, however we pronounce his
Well,
last name, um, he's an interesting case, and I want to hear all of you talk about this because he went to Wheaton College
yes, he did.
and was kind of just like a standard brand neocon evangelical guy for the early part of his career. I know dozens of people like that. I went to school with dozens and dozens of people like that. And then somewhere along the line, this guy got radicalized so that he's no longer sort of the standard brand guy that is fun to argue with at the the Wheaton College reunion. Um, but he has moved into this other path. And so this path of radicalization from Wheaton to Project 2025, that strikes me as something really worth figuring out. What happened to him?
Yeah, no, I've been following some of the kind of the same threads and tracking that trajectory as well. And I don't have a clear point of when that radicalization happened. But maybe a couple of thoughts on that. First, Wheaton College is kind of the epitome of respectable evangelicalism, but there are also radical elements there, particularly if you go deeper into its history. And just to keep that in mind, that there is a kind of public facing, moderate kind of Christianity Today, Wheaton, evangelicalism. But that's never entirely disconnected from a more radical political evangelicalism. I would look at some of these connections, networks, potential connections like the Council for National Policy, and then also his connections to, Heritage and to Claremont, either directly or through his now ex-wife, Mary Vought, who has also been deeply involved in these spaces. So I think there's a lot more to kind of uncover. I can just kind of give some surface thoughts at this point, but I think there's a lot that we don't know. But I think that's an important question. What is the relationship between the quote unquote moderate evangelicalism and the more radicalized versions? Particularly when we're, in the voting booth, there is no no real distinction there because the moderates repeatedly enable and empower the radicals. And so I think that's just important question and framework to keep in mind.
Just say one other thing, his now ex-wife, Mary, though, to give you a sense of like just the connective tissue, right? She's also connected to Heritage, their position at Heritage. And if you want to get a sense of where public education may be going, she is on retainer with our good friend Ryan Walters at Tulsa and in the Oklahoma public schools to the tune of $60,000 a year to consult with him about how he's turning Oklahoma public schools into Christian nationalists, kind of indoctrination centers.
What was that?
PR,
Hillsdale, right?
messaging. She's deeply connected. She was also a Claremont Fellow, I believe. I believe it was the same class as Meg Basham of the Daily Wire. So if you start, tracking these networks, you can see. I mean, these are the people who are being handed the reins of power.
Right. And just as a reminder, just the most crazy thing, right, is that Ryan Walters is not only asking people, the kind of Oklahoma school children, to watch him pray on videos, but set up a thing where the only one, to put Bibles in all the Oklahoma classrooms, and the only Bible that fit the criteria was, of course, Trump's Bible. The way he set that up. So
$60 a pop.
Yep.
And I think there's a new version that actually has Trump's name on the cover of the Bible.
Yeah, I saw that one.
My goodness. So Vought was at Hillsdale, right? Or somebody who was there.
I don't think he was at Hillsdale, but I would imagine that he's connected to the Hillsdale folks. I could be wrong about that.
It just sparked the memory that Hillsdale College in Michigan is tangentially and family related behind the 1776 curriculum.
Oh, absolutely. Yes.
Which is going, this is this is partly a Christian nationalist endeavor. And I think fundamentally what people need to understand is they get savvy, right? So it's not that these curricula won't mention slavery. It's not even that they wouldn't mention it and say it's, net negative, although they'll soft pedal it, right? What they're doing in these curricula is crafting a narrative of U.S. history that is always positive, is always moving forward, is always getting better, seemingly just by time and happenstance, without really giving due attention to the people who made progress happen at great sacrifice to themselves. So anyway, that's neither here nor there, but it's all part of the package that we're getting. I think one of the things that's important here as we list out all of these horrific proposals for cabinet picks and heads of department and whatnot, what can the average person do? I mean, it's just all doom and gloom, right? Is there anything that we can proactively do? I don't particularly think we should be leaning on the hope and good judgment of senators, Republican senators who are charged with investigating these folks. I think that is a fool's errand to believe that they'll do the right thing, even just regardless of the politics, just vetting these candidates as qualified or not, right? So what would you tell people?
Well, I think one of the things that we're doing is really important, and I hope it actually models for other folks who are, who are Christians. I mean, that's one of the things that we always talk about, is part of the reason why we're for scholars and we're people of faith, and that Christianity matters to us. And Jemar, I was really struck by something you said way back at the beginning, and that is you were exercising your frustration about how the media didn't want to talk about Christian nationalism. A different story that happened this week was really instructive to me. And that was, I don't know if you saw it or not, but 60 Minutes did this incredibly beautiful profile of the reopening of Notre Dame Cathedral in Paris. And, the photography was amazing. The praise of the craftspeople was just beautiful. They talked about French national identity in good ways, not like nationalism, but just what it means to be French and how Notre Dame fits in all of that. And so it was a great story. And they never once mentioned the words religion, Catholic, or faith. Nothing. They could have been reopening the Louvre. after a fire for all that it seemed. And I was sitting there, I was so frustrated. And I thought, this is this is part of the problem, is that our public discussion of really important things has gotten to the place where religion is completely excluded. So what that does is it just gives space to the extremists who want to come, who are also frustrated about that. I mean, I thought to myself, I'm going to call CBS and say, why do you mention religion? And I thought, well, then I'm going to sound like some right-wing Christian nationalist nutcase. And it's like, right now, the space that we're living in between is the empty space of a kind of fear and what I would call secularism that thinks that they can't talk about religion because they're going to make somebody mad or deal with it in some improper way that gets them sued. And then over on this side, the people who are not afraid to take religion in its worst forms right into the public square and try to, remake all these institutions with that. And so what I really hope that our being together can do is that regular people who are mad at both of those extremes have to figure out how to live in this other space and figure out how to shape the life of their faith communities, their families, and all these things as sort of pools and wells of resistance, saying, hey, look, Christianity, yeah, tons of mistakes. We know all of them. Nobody can fool any of the four of us on the bad things that Christians have done over the centuries. And yet we're still insisting that faith is an important part of this conversation, that understanding religion as a cultural phenomenon is a really important part of this, and that in order to move ahead, we've got to bring everything to the table. And so I think that that's one of the things that we can try to do. Inspire people who feel trapped in that middle space to make better decisions, to learn about, to become educated themselves, etc. So I was shocked by that Notre Dame story, even while I loved it at the same time.
Thank you. Other thoughts of what do we do with these nightmarish cabinet picks or anything?
Yeah, I mean, I would say like one thing is to recognize them for what they are. And I mean, they are just a big middle finger to the whole concept of democratic governance. I mean, they're in no way an attempt to run these agencies and departments with any kind of, skill or, integrity or anything. I mean, they really are a burn it down. So I think for me, it's been helpful to not be surprised by the depths of depravity that we see like in these picks, because they literally are designed to be exactly that. And so I think if we stop thinking like, oh, wait, are they just not aware? Like, no, they are completely aware of what these picks are. And they are that, and that's the whole Project 2020 vision is you burn it down. Right. But we're all going to burn with it. Is the thing, I think, in realizing that. So it may be a fool's errand, Jemar. I would say, though, that we do have a little window to put pressure, I think, on senators. I mean, they are the first line of defense here, right? To kind of winnow out some of the worst of these, picks. They're not, I mean, it's sort of one of those things where there's so much coming. They're not going to, it's like a screen where like 90% of the particles, the holes are so big that 90% of the particles are going to get through. But if they catch two or three, I mean, we may be better off if they catch two or three of the worst of these. So I'm kind of hoping, for some of that. I think that we can put some pressure there. And I think we can continue, as you said, Diana, to like continue to remind like public and journalists that like, yeah, there is an like explicit Christian nationalist vision here, right? That is giving some of the real energy behind this. It's not just authoritarianism. It's not just populism. Like there's a kind of religious vision of kind of a kind of violent Christendom behind all of this stuff. And we need to kind of make sure we call that out. We're really not going to understand the full depth of the risk or the dangers that we're facing if we don't understand that aspect of it. And I think we're not going to understand how to resist it if we don't understand that aspect of it.
Yeah. Oh, so many thoughts here. because I have to confess, I don't have a clear agenda in terms of like what I feel has to be done and what I need to do, because when I think about, yeah, we can exert pressure, and Gates is out, and Hegseth is maybe just teetering on the brink. But what about the replacements? Is that going to be any better? So yes, reprehensible individuals, but maybe having a slightly more respectable, competent person to fill that slot may actually make it burn down all the quicker. It's so hard to know what is even effective in this moment. I think that's how I would characterize just a lot of my sense in the week since the election is just questioning. I feel like the entire landscape has shifted so profoundly that we need to rethink our engagement in many respects. Our rhetoric, our organizing. You can kind of see right now that the Democrats are at a loss. They don't have any kind of common message, and everybody's kind of flailing, and that's, I think, to be expected in a moment like this. Diana, what you said too about us kind of representing the non extremist version of Christianity. I think it's also worth noting that there's I would presume quite a bit of variety amongst the four of us. And if you want to talk about, particular beliefs or doctrines or backgrounds or, on any given issue, and that we didn't come together because we have all the exact same theological views. In fact, we've never actually, we know each other quite well. We spent a lot of time together. What we don't do is say, well, what's your view on predestination? And I don't know if I can work with you all if you don't have my view on, right? It's
Our sprinkling babies. I mean, come on.
Oh my gosh. It's a whole different posture.
Says the Baptist, right?
Of how we live with our faith commitments in a broader Christian community, and then within a broader pluralist society. And that this is not, I think you can see that from the four of us that our faith, that we can hold some things loosely does not mean that we're wishy-washy on other things, right? It roots us, it grounds us, it emboldens us to speak into this moment, even as we, can do so as voices committed to a pluralist vision, and voices, committed to dealing with one another with integrity, honesty, and compassion. And so I think, what other folks can do is kind of dig deep into their own kind of faith traditions, into their own value systems, and remind themselves of what they hold to be true and good and right, and prepare themselves for what is certainly to be bewildering, unsettling next few months and years.
I echo all that and underline and highlight everything you all said. For me, I think a couple of things. Number one, I want to say to listeners, your instincts are right. When you see and hear these cabinet picks and you think, what in the world? You're right. Because these are not people of integrity. These are not people of good moral character, to say nothing of the actual job qualifications they do or don't have. And so don't let anyone gaslight you into thinking that you are somehow overreacting. You're not. If anything, as a nation, we have underreacted to what they have clearly telegraphed, even in things such as Project 2025, and the list can go on and on and on. So number one, your instincts are right. Trust those. Don't let anyone say that you're making this overblown, and don't let them minimize it for you. Number two, I think you're right, Robbie. There's something we can do in pressuring our senators. They still have decision-making ability in some of these picks. And if they hear from enough constituents, and this is a state level thing too, they are concerned about reelection. They're concerned, hopefully, about representing their state. And so politically, there is at least something we can do. And then thirdly, I think that conversations like this are only going to become more important. So we need to protect and support the people speaking truth to power. So that means for our listeners, go to convocation.substack.com and subscribe. It's completely free. Go to each of our individual publications and subscribe. Become a paid subscriber if that's how you want to support, especially as we look at 2025 and a new year. And I say that not even just wrapping up, I'm saying that literally because we are going to need to support in a much more robust and intentional way the voices that we want to amplify. We're not going to simply be able to count on folks like us hopping on a mic and saying what we say. That's going to get harder and harder, policy-wise, culture-wise. And so we need all the support we can get. And maybe you're one of those voices too. And, I wouldn't be afraid to ask for that support, whatever that looks like. So
use your voice. Use
your
it.
voice. Absolutely. Yeah. We're going to need a chorus here.
Yes.
So, with that, we are in December, and Robbie, you brought up just offline, you're thinking about Advent, and I wondered if you had any words. I know it's kind of a somber season, but any sort of perspective or reflection from this liturgical season for this moment that we're in.
Yeah, well, I may be a funny one to start with because I did grow up Baptist, hence the baptismal kind of quip earlier on, which also means that at Southern Baptist, we never celebrated Advent. So it wasn't a part of my growing up at all. I came to it very, very late. In fact, I came to really celebrate Advent about the time I met my wife, Jody, who's Jewish. And so we began to celebrate Advent and Hanukkah together, right? And so they're both these, and it was pretty powerful for me. And I think as converts to practices, it sometimes is more powerful than if something you grew up with and just kind of part of the landscape. But I remember in these moments, like you can see my door behind me; it's pitch dark out there now, right? And it's not that late in the day. This sense of these little candles kind of holding forth against all the darkness. It's getting colder, it's getting darker. And just that sense of, as the days get shorter, we're lighting these little lights, right, that we're going to kind of let burn. And it does only take one, right? And you kind of can see something. And so I feel like there's something about this Advent that I'm already, that the political moment feels a lot like that, right? It always feels like that this year, but it feels dark, it feels cold. And it feels like sometimes, that your question, Jemar, what can we do? Maybe all we can do right now is put another candle, in the candle holder and hope it casts enough light for us to see a little bit further. So maybe I'll pass it to Diana, who's running a whole Advent thing over at her Substack at the cottage. Yeah.
Yeah, the theme I always pick an Advent theme every year. Last year, I think it was a beautiful Advent, which was really nice. And this year, months ago, I think I got a little bit inspired by all the talk of joy in the midsummer around the political campaigns. And so I thought, oh, that's an interesting topic. Maybe I'll do that for Advent this year. And I came up with this idea, Advent, a season of justice and joy. And then the election happened, and I changed the title to Advent, a season of justice and joy? Question mark. And so what I'm trying to do in my Sunday newsletter, which is free and open to everybody who's in the cottage, is to pick up the themes of justice and joy from the assigned readings from the Protestant and Catholic lectionary that's used by many churches globally, the scheduled readings for the day. And so the last week I talked about Thessalonians. First Thessalonians came up, and so I talked about apocalypticism as actually an aspect of both justice and joy. So it was really fun. And then I'm having a video Advent calendar every single day this month, where my paid subscribers at the cottage get a little video reflection from one of my friends, authors, musicians, activists, different sorts, and it's just like a 1 to 2 minute reflection where someone they love, uh, whose work they know, says, what is it that's giving them joy this Advent? Where are you finding joy this Advent? And boy, today they got treated first thing. This is the first Monday of Advent. First thing this morning, they got a beautiful song from Carrie Newcomer, the singer-songwriter. She's a wonderful human, and she's worked with Indigo Girls and all kinds of famous, really super famous people. And her song was about a light in a window, and it was so beautiful. And people, I got so many emails today, not panicked emails about what are we going to do? I feel horrible. I'm so disappointed by this election. Scared emails that I've been getting all month. Today, I got just dozens, scores of emails from people who were like, that's what I want to do. I want to just hold up one light. I just want to be a light in the window. And people talking about how much they need that moment. So that's what I'm doing at the cottage. And it's really, it's going to be a journey for me because I'm having trouble seeing the traces of justice and joy. And so I think part of this as well for me as the author or the convener of this whole project is to listen to people who are much wiser than me, help me get to a new place with both of these things. And Jemar is coming this week to do one of the rare hour-long events. And so he's not just getting a minute. I gave him 60 minutes to talk about justice and joy.
I am here to help anyone fall asleep. If you have trouble, just tune in. No, it'll be great. I'm so thrilled about that theme. And I do appreciate the idea of a light shining in the darkness, which is biblical, right? So yeah, that might be all we can focus on for the moment. Thank y'all again for a great conversation yet again. And on behalf of me and my co-host, thank you for joining the Convocation Unscripted. Remember, of course, to subscribe to our bi-weekly newsletter, convocation.substack.com, and our individual Substack links are in the show notes. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you at the next Convocation.